So welcome everyone, Shalom Aleichem. And this week
Shalom.
I want to focus on a rule that's known in Hebrew as Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. So here's the rule. And there's a nice explanation of this rule by the Ramban. Let me get rid of some things here. He says, why do we need to learn about all the different anecdotes, some of them embarrassing, some of them are morally compromising that we are told about our forefathers? And so he explains in his commentary on the Torah that, oh, do we have a volunteer to read Nachmanides?
Yeah,
Okay.
designated one.
Nachmanides from the 13th century said, everything that involves the ancestors is a sign for their descendants. For this reason, scripture writes extensively about their journeys, digging of wells, and other incidents. The reader likely considers these narrations to be trivial and without benefit, but all of them teach us about the future, since when one of these things happened to one of the patriarchs, the reader can consider it carefully and derive from it what will happen to their descendants.
So he has an interesting take. I don't agree with the last part, what will happen. I don't think you can derive what will happen, but you might derive how you're supposed to behave.
Yeah.
Whether if it's good behavior that should be commendable, then you say, okay, this is how we should behave, and it's something that we're going to see today. Maybe you shouldn't. We'll see both actually. So I want to see this idea through the lens of two stories, and here you have the pictures representing these two stories. What are these two stories? On the left is what?
Abraham and
Oh,
the three.
Abraham. Yeah.
Right. The three guests, the three
Yes.
guests that he hosted in his house, and he ran after them and invited them to his home. And the second story, the second picture, who was sent to the desert with a little boy?
Oh,
Hagar.
Right. Hagar and Ishmael
yeah.
expelled, sent is a euphemism, expelled from Abraham's house to the tune of Sarah, who demanded it, and Abraham, who felt bad about it, but then he went anyhow, and he did it. Let's start with the first story. So this story is really interesting. The first, it opens with a verse, וירא אליו אדוני באלוני ממרא, והוא יושב פתח האוהל כחום היום. Now the Lord appeared to him, to Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, and he was sitting at the entrance of the tent when the day was hot. What are you expecting now to see in the next verse? If you just stopped here and I asked, what will be in the next verse? What did he say to him?
He said coming out of the heat.
Right? No, I'm saying, what do we expect in the next verse? I haven't showed it to you yet. But you would expect that the next verse is
The
the
angels
prophecy.
come. Yeah.
The prophecy that he's going to talk about, whether it's you'll have a son, whether it's the land, whether it's maybe something completely, whatever that prophecy is, we're expecting that because this is an introductory statement. Yet, we go to the next verse, verse 2, and surprise. Oh, we don't see a revelation. We don't see God speaking to Abraham. We see, the verse says, וישא עיניו וירא, והנה שלושה אנשים ניצבים עליו. וירא סיגותיו מפתח האוהל וישתחו ארצה. And he lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, three men were standing beside him. And he saw, and he ran toward them from the entrance of the tent, and he prostrated himself to the ground. So was there a revelation, or was there not a revelation?
No revelation at this point.
No.
Right. It seems like the pshat is that there's no revelation, and he said, you know what? I have a better thing to do. I see three people. They need hospitality. They're walking in the desert, tired, thirsty, hungry. So God can wait. I'm going to go run toward them and invite them into my tent.
Isn't the Shemai? Isn't the secret? Isn't the thing that that gives a hint to this? Because it says in the previous thing that the day was hot. So
Right.
why would that? If it was just between Abraham and God, why would that be included?
Ah, that's a great point. I didn't think of that. So it
Why
seems
was the picture showing three women too, not
no,
three
no,
men?
no. These were men. These were men.
They were men, really.
Yeah.
It looked like women to me.
Okay. Oh, maybe a bad painting, but he runs towards them, and then he says an enigmatic statement. And there's so many ways. There's different ways to interpret this statement. So this is the third verse. Vayomar Adonai, imna matzati chen beinecha, al na ta'avor me'al avdecha. And then he continues, Yukachna me'at mayim. So let's look at the English. And he said, Adonai, if only I have found favor in your eyes, please do not pass on from beside your servant. Let a little water be brought.
So is
this,
that Adonai a plural?
oh, excellent point. So as Natalie points out, there's two ways to look at this word, because we know the word for master is Adon. Let's just do a little, let's break it down. Let's break down the word. So perhaps option one, it's simply the plural possessive, my Adonim. So, right, in Hebrew, we have a singular Adon. And then if we make it plural, it's Adonim. But if you want to make a plural possessive, my plural something, you drop the mem and you put the vowel I at the end. So that's how you make a plural possessive belonging to me.
So how would you say my God?
Well, it depends what is what
Singular.
wait. Right.
This
So
isn't referring to God. This is
Adoni,
referring
yeah.
to
What?
three
It-
men.
So we're going to see an argument, a machlokes between commentators. Who is he talking to here? But I
Right.
just want to convince you that this word can be interpreted two ways.
Right.
It's either secular, he's talking to my masters, or it's actually God's name, because we use it in our
You're
in
right.
our davening. So we go back to the verse. Who is he more likely to be talking to? Now look at the verse. We know there's two options grammatically. There's two options to take this word Adonai in the terms of the Talmud. We'll see in a second. They call it the Kodesh, it's a holy name of God, or Chol, secular. He's just talking to the people, to those three men, and saying my masters. So it's an honorable way of addressing them.
So wouldn't it, if it were referring to God, wouldn't it be Yud Hey Vav Hey? Why would it be written out like that in the Torah?
So we have to see. There are other places. That's a great question. I haven't researched it. Whether Abraham uses. There are other places. I'll tell you why. How I know, because the Talmud. We'll get to that. The Talmud is saying the Talmud went and compared all the places where Abraham used these four letters, and saw that he was talking to God, right? Because we use different names. We use Elohim. We use Yud Hey Vav Hey, but Abraham himself actually did use the four letters Aleph Dalet Nun Yun, right, when talking to God, and so both can be an option here. And
Yes, but
yeah.
Shemai, in the context, why would God need Abraham's water?
Oh, I was waiting for somebody to say that. It seems from the continuation
Right.
that clearly, right, he's talking to the men. How could he be saying to God, let alone be? So the only way is to have a break, to say, up until your servant was talking to God, and then from here, yukachna me'at mayim, break. We have a 3 stars, and now he switched and talked to the 3 men, right? Because what's troubling commentators is you're telling me he ran away from God without even asking God's permission, without saying, "Excuse me, God, I need to attend to something. Because if we take your position, which is actually a very valid position, Aaron, then what do we see? If we go back to the 3 verses, then we see that he's in the middle of a prophecy. He sees 3 men, and then immediately runs to them, doesn't talk to God, and starts talking to them. But isn't that a little chutzpahdik?
Well, it's like you're talking to someone on your phone and someone comes into the room with some very pressing need. And you say, can you just hold on a minute? I have a situation here. Please don't go away.
So
That's what he's saying to God. He's saying,
God, right.
You know,
and then he turns to the men and says, here, I'll bring you water, I'll bring you meat, etc., bread, etc. Okay, very good. So that's one way of interpreting it, that he's being polite. He is being polite to God. He is taking permission, as it were, from God and saying, I have this pressing need. I have these 3 people hungry. It's hot. The day is very hot. They must be thirsty and hungry. And so don't go away. Don't pass on. And then he continues talking to them. It's like, okay.
May I ask something? Is he having an actual conversation with God?
Well, that was the opening. That it doesn't seem that God says to him anything. It just said God appeared. God appeared, and then immediately the next verse is verse 2. Abraham lifts his eyes. So I call it interrupting God. It's before God had an opportunity to give him the prophecy, to do the appearance. But here's the thing. We have a commentator who, so what is the relationship between God's appearance and the 3 verses? That's what you're asking, basically, Jack. You're saying God appeared, but is God appearing through the visitors, or is it a separate event? And so we have 2 options here, and we'll see 2 commentators. The first option is God appeared, that was the first verse, Vayera elav Adonai, by sending 3 men / angels. We know later they are, people who can prophesize and give predictions about birth, etc. But at the beginning of the story, they're just men. And so that was the appearance. That's one option. The other option is 2 separate events. If there was an interruption here, God wanted to say something, but Abraham had the audacity, because it's really, it takes a little bit of chutzpah to say, wait, God, there's something more important right now. I'm going to take care of these 3 men.
Shammai, isn't it possible that this is meant to show how important it is to be hospitable and to take care of people that are in need?
Yes, excellent point. We'll see the Talmud makes your point and takes it to the next level. So that's a very, very important point. And I think that's maybe what the Ramban was talking about, what we can learn about this for future generations. But let's see the first explanation, that no, there's no interruption. Solomon Dubno, an 18th century commentator, is found in Mendelssohn's commentary. Okay, a volunteer to read Solomon Dubno? Anyone? Okay, the first verse mentions in general that Hashem, the name, appeared to him, and afterwards it explains how. And it said that he saw 3 men that were angels. So it's more like a general introduction about what's happening in this chapter, and now the details. So the first verse, it's not 2 separate events. This is how God appeared to Abraham, by sending 3 men who appeared as men, stragglers in the desert, etc. So this explanation won't fit with, if we want to say that Abraham wants to show us the importance of hospitality, then this is not the explanation that will help us in that regard. But we do have a second explanation, that it's a separate event. And in a commentary called Seichel Tov from the 12th century Italy, he clearly states, and he lifted his eyes and he saw, that was the second verse, after the divine presence appeared to him. So Abraham, we called it the interruption. He interrupted God. He didn't let God even start speaking, and he lifted his eyes, and by doing so and running towards them, made a conscientious choice. This is more important to me. It's more important to me to be hospitable to these people. So the Talmud discusses whether, and it brings, of course, two opinions, whether the word Adonai is holy or secular. So the first opinion brought by the Talmud, every term that can be used as a divine epithet used in the Abraham narrative is holy. So every time you see the word Adonai in Abraham's talking, it's referring to Elohim, to God, except for one which is secular. This is our Adonai. This is our verse here. And he said, Adonai, if I find favor in your eyes, do not pass on. Right? I have something important to take care of. So that's the first opinion in the Talmud. But Hananiah, son of Rabbi Joshua's brother, and Rabbi Elazar, son of Azariah, said, this too is holy. So it is referring to God. And it's more like what Gary said. He's addressing God by taking permission from God and saying, I beg your indulgence, God. That's what we would say today. I see three people who need my help. So now there's another grammatical differentiation that we can use to determine whether he's talking to God or he's talking to the three men. Because the next part of the verse, you can look at it and see whether it's singular or plural. Because when he says, Al na tavo me'al avdecha, let's see the Hebrew.
Singular.
Singular. So
Yeah.
here it is. So Adonai, okay. Imna matzati, so plural, or maybe God. Imna matzati chen beinecha, that's singular. If it were plural, if you were talking to all three, what should it have been? Be'einechem. And al na tavo me'al avdecha. If it was plural to all three, me'al avdechem. But we can
Baal
solve,
Tavru, right?
right? All right. And also al na tavo. Good point. But we can solve this and say he's talking to the elder one, to the the elderly, and addressing him. And it is a common practice in the ancient Eastern Middle East that you, even though you have a group, you talk to the elder among the group as a sign of respect. And so you start off by even maybe the Adonai, the plural, is maybe even talking to the elderly one and talking to him in plural, the royal we, the royal you plural, but then continuing on in singular. So that's an option with the singular and the plural. So if we look at other manuscripts of the Torah, indeed, the Greek, the Septuagint, and the Syriac Peshitta, they actually read it as Adoni in the singular. That's very interesting, right? This is the Masoretes. It's not like, even if you're believe that the Torah was given in Mount Sinai, etc. Everybody agrees that the vowels are much later, 10th century, 9th century. So they put vowels here. But other manuscripts, like we said, they don't read Adonai, they read Adoni, which is clearly singular. Okay, so that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, that we have other manuscripts that say Adoni. And so, again, why is he switching between the singular and the plural? So we can say that he was addressing the elder one among the three, the head one. Maybe it was a sign that he's the leader of them. And once he secures his agreement, he continues to plural, because the next verse is about the water and the food and the meat, and that's clearly in plural. So then he's talking to all three of them. Or that he first is addressing God and asks him to wait, and then he turns his attention to the three men and angels and talking about the water and please stay with me and I'll make you food. So now to Aaron's point, the Talmud sees this, and the Talmud makes a pretty amazing behavioral rule and says as follows. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, גדולה הכנסת אורחים מקבלת פני השכינה. דכתיב, ויאמר אדוני, אם נא מצאתי חן בעיניך, אל נא תעבור מעל עבדיך. And in the English, we have a volunteer to read the English.
Okay, Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav, hospitality to strangers is greater than welcoming the divine presence.
So when the values compete, when we have a competition between two values, divine revelation and helping somebody in need, helping a stranger takes precedence. Amazing statement. And I think it can even be more amazing if we say that he's not talking to God and that he did not even ask permission. Because I want to take this statement to the next level and say, and go back to our verse and say, he didn't even ask permission. He immediately started talking to the people there. So that would be even more of a chiddush, right? More of an instruction for future generations about about what takes precedence when you have a system of values. In other words, it was so important that he immediately started talking to them, and we saw that there's opinions that it's secular, that this Adonai is secular, and if that's the case, then we go back to verse 1 and 2. It's just he leaves God alone without even asking permission. Why? Because hospitality to strangers is greater even than divine presence.
Wait, Shemai.
Yeah.
I know that the Talmud is agreeing with what I said, but I think they went overboard. I don't think really that if God came to you and there were three thirsty people, that you should ignore God. So literally, I don't think that's the case. But I think the verse is simply to teach us how important hospitality is.
Okay. So you're saying that to support that he asked permission from God, right? You're saying this
No,
verb.
no. I'm saying that they shouldn't have, or that they went overboard on this. That
Right, but clearly, I mean, there's no permission given by God. God, even if he's talking to God, okay, let's say that he's asking God, God, please don't pass on, please stay here. God never answered. He goes immediately and gives them water and slaughters animals to feed them with meat and bakes a cake and tells Sarah. So there's his actions speak louder than anything, than all these words. And
But
right, but I just don't.
the verse itself doesn't give us, other than the fact that it's hot out, we don't have any proof, any evidence that these folks were in need, just that he wanted to be a good host.
Well, but that's implied, they didn't have, water bottles,
We don't
or,
know.
with them. And it's just an extension of saving a human life is the most divine thing you can do.
Right, but I
And
don't. Right,
yeah,
but I
I
don't
like
think
that because. So let's see the next verses. I'm pulling up the whole chapter now to show you. Take water, please. Let a little be brought. Bathe your feet. Recline under the tree. They're tired. They're thirsty. And let me fetch a morsel of bread. They're hungry, that you may refresh yourselves. All these words, all these adjectives and verbs clearly indicate they are in distress. They might be dehydrated. Um, and then after you do all that, fine. Then you can go on. In other words, you don't have to be. It's not a hotel where I'm asking you to stay and pay for my hospitality. I'll just give you whatever you need to be able to continue. That tells me they are in great need. And look at this verb. Abraham hastened into Sarah. You hasten when somebody's in distress. I think that also points to he saw their situation, and like Gary said, he even thought of it as saving their lives, not just here have a place for the night, but they're in a situation where they might be dehydrated, might be starving, and so by maher, and then again mahari, quick, right? And then ve'elabakar ratz Abraham ran. Why is all this quickness? If they're just people visiting, take your time. What's the rush? I think that supports what Gary is saying. What do you guys think?
but I still think, Shammai, that that this is simply that the story is not to be taken literally. It's simply a story to teach
Yeah.
us how important hospitality is. You can't tell me that anybody who would see God would simply run to help people in
Yeah,
distress.
no, I think that's exactly the point. I think it's showing us. Oh, I'll show you another thing. Uh, the use of the verb saw, see. It doesn't come out in the English, but um, in the in the Hebrew, it's pretty clear that there's a play on the words vayera and vayal. So let me show you. Do you guys see the slides? Right? You see the slide? Vayera elav Adonai, God was seen to him. Literally, it's not appeared, it's seen. That's the verb, nir'ah. In modern Hebrew, we would say nir'ah. And then, so here's what the Talmud is saying. Don't talk to me about these lofty ideals, meditation, talking to God. You know what the important seeing is? Here, I'll tell you what the important seeing in life is. See three strangers. Vaysainav, vayal. It's the same root, same word. It's just the active versus the passive. And then again, vayal. Why say twice vayal? Let's see. How about the English? And he lifted his eyes and saw, and then he saw. Yeah, the English even captures that. Why twice saw? I think the point is exactly what the Talmud is saying. I don't care about people who say I have a divine communion with God and some lofty, meditation, going to the desert, to the forest, and being silent my whole life, and I'm not putting down any other religion, but I'm just saying Judaism focuses on actions, and you see the contrast here. You would think
So,
God being seen by Abraham is the ultimate thing. So, first finish with the God, then take care of the strangers. And this teaches us no. Abraham says we're a religion of action. If we see people in distress, even if I'm in the middle of being seen by God of this vayera, that's not important. What the seeing that is important in our religion is the second seeing, the second verse. I see three people. I see them. I'm going to run towards them. I'm going to offer them water, etc., etc.
so I think that the conclusion, I'm not at all pushing back against that it's meant to teach us the importance of hospitality. But if I were rewriting this part, I I don't see the proof that the three men slash angels were in distress. If they had been in distress, Abraham should have been, and Abraham yelled to his servants, bring the men into the tent, get them quick, bring water, quick, bring food. He says, sit down and have a bissel of water and a little bit of food. It doesn't argue the same way.
Okay, I hear you, but I still think that you don't delegate saving lives. No, you don't delegate that. Abraham says, I mean, everything is done quickly here. Vaymaher, Abraham hastened, yes, he had servants. He could have done it, but I think that's another lesson.
He
When it
takes
comes,
time to prostrate himself. I mean, he should have just schlepped him into the tent to
well,
get
I
him out of
mean,
the hot sun.
I mean, first he has to do it in a way that he, really finds out that they need. I mean, you can't. Reminds me of some candidate who said, "I'm going to help women whether they like it or not." We're not going to mention his name, but you also heard it on the news. And then, uh, so you can't do that. You can't just take people and say, "I'm going to feed you. I'm going to give you water. I don't care whether you're thirsty or whether you're in distress or not." I see this as the politeness is trying to find out, are you really in distress? And then
See?
they are in need of water, and so he goes on and he brings the bread and he brings the water, um, and interestingly, he tells his wife Sarah, right? He doesn't tell his servants to do it, because again, you don't delegate saving lives. It's if you see somebody, maybe not saving life, maybe just a person in distress who has been on a long journey, and you're not sure about his situation. And so, anyway, so I think that's a very important lesson that we can learn from this story about Yiddishkeit, about Judaism. So thank you all for joining us.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Shammai. See you next week.